She hadn't meant to cry. Not here, not again. But the tears came anyway, running down her face as quietly as the night around her. The train station was cold, quiet, and smelled like metal and old wood. The bench beneath her was hard, and the jacket wrapped around her shoulders wasn't hers. It had been left behind by someone in a rush. She hadn't stolen it, not really. She just needed it more. Her name was Lena, pregnant, nowhere to go. She curled her knees to her chest, wincing as the sharp pain in her side reminded her of the long walk from the last town, where someone had shouted at her to get off their porch. That town had been colder than this one. Not the air, just the people. She hadn't eaten since yesterday, maybe the day before. Time blurred when you didn't have a place to sleep or anyone to call. She'd stopped counting days since she ran. All she knew was that her feet ached, her back hurt, and the weight of everything felt heavier than the child growing inside her. A train rumbled by without stopping. She didn't lift her head. She knew by now how most people looked at her, like she was trouble, like she'd done something wrong. They didn't see the bruises under her sleeves or the way she flinched when someone raised their voice. The truth was, she hadn't told anyone. Not about the baby, not about why she left, not even about the blood in the bathroom sink the night before she ran. She just pulled her coat tighter and walked out of the house as quiet as she could, hoping he wouldn't wake up. Her mother had stopped looking her in the eye months ago. Her stepfather had never stopped looking. Her stomach twisted, hunger or maybe nerves or maybe just fear. Everything inside her was knotted up tight, and it felt like it was all going to break. The station was empty now. A few hours ago, there were men in dust-covered hats and women with screaming kids. But the night had thinned them out. Most had gone home. The man behind the ticket window had turned off the lights and locked up, not even noticing her in the shadows. Maybe he had. Maybe he just didn't care. She heard boots on wood. Slow steps, heavy but not rushed. Not like the last time, when she knew he was coming up the stairs, and her heart was pounding so loud she couldn't hear anything else. These steps were different. She looked up, ready to bolt if she had to. But the man stopped a few feet away, his face hidden under the brim of his hat. He looked at her for a long second, not with pity, not with suspicion, just looked. "You cold?" he asked. His voice was low, rough around the edges, but quiet, gentle. She didn't answer. She didn't trust voices anymore. A man's voice could start soft and still end up yelling, still end up hurting. "I got a truck," he said, glancing toward the road. Not too far. Still, she said nothing. He nodded, like he expected that. Then he took off his coat, an old wool thing worn around the collar, and sat on the bench beside her. He didn't offer it to her, just set it there, then backed away like he didn't want to scare her. "I'll be out front," he said, "if you want to come." And just like that, he was gone. She stared at the coat. It smelled like horses and dust and sweat. It was warm. She didn't put it on, not right away. Her eyes stayed fixed on the door. She didn't move for 10 whole minutes. Not until the cold crept into her bones and the baby inside her shifted and she remembered what it felt like to be hit while trying to protect her stomach. Her hand went to it, just like always, like she could block the world if she pressed hard enough. She picked up the coat. The truck was parked under a flickering street lamp. He sat behind the wheel, engine running, one arm draped over the steering wheel, the other holding a cigarette he hadn't lit. She stood beside the truck for a moment, her fingers clutched around the door handle, heart banging in her ears. But then she heard it, her mother's voice, cold and careless. "You wanted this. Don't come crying to me." Her jaw tightened. She pulled open the door and climbed in. The inside of the truck was warm, dusty. There were tools on the floor and hay on the seat, and the scent of tobacco clung to the upholstery. He didn't say a word, just nodded once, then pulled out onto the road. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't care. She watched the road slip by through the window, dark hills and fence posts sliding past in the headlights. After a while, he spoke. "Name's Wyatt," he said. "I got a ranch out past Junction. Ain't much, but it's quiet." Still, she didn't talk. "You don't gotta say nothing," he added, softer this time. "I ain't asking questions. She stared straight ahead, afraid her voice would crack if she tried to use it. Her hands were shaking, even though the truck was warm now. After another stretch of silence, he glanced at her. "You hungry?" She nodded. A small one, barely noticeable. He didn't smile, but his voice gentled even more. "We'll stop in town first. Rosie's still open. She makes a good stew. Won't ask you anything either." That part stuck. Won't ask you anything. She hadn't realized how much that mattered. She blinked fast and looked out the window again. No one had called her by name in days. Not since the shelter turned her away because she didn't have papers. Not since the church lady gave her a sandwich and then locked the door behind her. The baby kicked softly, not a lot, just enough to remind her it was still there, still growing, still waiting for her to figure out how to keep it safe. She laid her hand over her belly again. She didn't know why she trusted Wyatt. Maybe it was the way he didn't talk too much. Maybe it was the way he hadn't looked at her belly like it was her fault. Or maybe it was just that quiet tone, like he knew something about staying silent when the world got loud. By the time they pulled into town, it was nearly midnight. The diner lights glowed warm and yellow in the dark. He parked out front, didn't say a word, just got out and walked to the door. Held it open. She followed. Inside, the smell of soup and grease wrapped around her. Her stomach growled so loud the waitress looked up, startled, but Wyatt just nodded toward a booth in the corner. "Get her whatever she wants," he told the waitress. "I'll cover it." Lena slid into the seat, still clutching the coat around her shoulders. She didn't open the menu. She just whispered, "Stew's fine." The woman nodded and left. Wyatt didn't sit across from her. He stood nearby, then said, "I'll be out front. Let you eat in peace." And again, he left. She stared after him, her throat tight, eyes burning. No one had done that before. Not left her alone and safe at the same time. Not without wanting something. Not without asking questions. She picked up the spoon with shaking hands. The stew was hot and thick and salty, and she didn't stop eating until the bowl was nearly empty. When she finally stepped back outside, he was still there, leaning against the truck, his hat pulled low. He didn't ask if she wanted to come with him again. He just opened the passenger door, and she climbed in. The road stretched out like a ribbon of dust and silence. As the truck moved farther from town, Lena pulled Wyatt's coat tighter around herself, half expecting him to suddenly change his mind, to say something sharp or ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. But he didn't. The rancher just drove, one hand steady on the wheel, the other resting on the windowsill, fingers tapping now and then like he was thinking but not speaking. She kept her eyes on the window, but her mind was far from the hills they passed. It had started with a bruise, small on her hip. She didn't even know how it got there. Then another and another. Her stepfather had a temper that came on slow, like a pot boiling. Her mother had said it was just how he was, that Lena needed to be more respectful, more careful, more quiet. But Lena had been quiet. She'd walked on eggshells, kept her head down, swallowed every sharp word. Still, the bruises grew. And when the pregnancy test turned up positive, everything inside her shattered. Her mother's eyes had gone cold when she found the test in the trash. "I told you not to act grown," she'd said. "Now look what you've done." She hadn't asked who the father was. Hadn't wanted to know. Deep down, Lena thought maybe she already did. The only one who ever tried to help was her older brother, Jamie, but he'd left for the army years ago. He'd written her letters, sent money when he could. She'd never told him what happened after he left. She was ashamed, and part of her thought he wouldn't believe her. Or worse, he'd come back and do something reckless. Her brother had always had fire in him, and fire got people hurt. Wyatt cleared his throat, pulling her back to the truck. "We're almost there," he said. His voice was low, like always, like someone who spent more time around horses than people. "You'll see a windmill first." She didn't know what to expect. He still hadn't said what he wanted or why he'd offered to help her. That made her nervous, but tired too, bone-deep tired. She hadn't rested in weeks. Not real sleep, not the kind where you stop being afraid. They turned off onto a gravel road, past a field of grazing cattle, then a wooden fence, and finally the windmill he mentioned, spinning lazy circles in the breeze. The ranch house came into view next, small, old, but neat. A few outbuildings stood nearby. A single porch light glowed like a warm dot in the dark. Two dogs barked as they pulled up, but stopped when Wyatt got out and gave a sharp whistle. They bounded up to him, one brown and heavy-boned, the other smaller and black with bright eyes. He scratched behind their ears like it was routine. "They won't bite," he said as she hesitated by the truck door. "They bark at everything, even tumbleweeds." She stepped out slowly, unsure, one hand pressed over her belly again. The cold air stung her cheeks, but it was clean, fresh. Out here, the silence was different. Not empty, but wide. Open. He led her inside without a word. The house smelled like wood smoke and old leather. The floors creaked. There were papers stacked on a table, boots by the door, a fire snapping in the hearth. Nothing fancy, nothing staged, just lived in. "You can sleep in the back room," he said, nodding down the hall. "It's warm and the bed's clean. Ain't got much else, but it's yours for now." Lena stood there, unsure what to say. She watched him move into the kitchen, pour himself a glass of water. There was something about the way he moved, slow, steady, like nothing surprised him anymore. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, the words out before she could stop them. He didn't look up right away. Just sipped his water, set the glass down, then met her eyes. "'Cause someone once did the same for me," he said, "when I didn't have no place to go." That was all he said, but something in his voice told her there was more under the surface. She didn't press. The guest room was small but warm. A worn quilt covered the bed. She sat down slowly, afraid the kindness would vanish if she let herself get comfortable. But it didn't. Not that night. Not the next. By the third day, she met someone else on the ranch. Anita, the housekeeper who came by twice a week. A sharp-eyed woman with iron gray hair, skin like aged paper, and hands that moved with purpose. She raised her eyebrows when she saw Lena, but didn't ask anything. "You're staying?" she said, more of a statement than a question. Lena nodded. Anita glanced at her belly. "Boy or girl?" "I don't know yet," Lena said. "Hope you're eating enough." Lena looked down. "Trying." "Well, try harder." Anita disappeared into the kitchen, clanking pots like she was mad at them. But when lunch was ready, the plate she handed Lena was full and hot. She didn't talk much, but she always had food ready when Lena came in. And then there was Jack. He showed up on the fifth morning, Wyatt's ranch hand, a lanky man in his 30s with a drawl thicker than molasses and a crooked smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He noticed Lena right away, gave her a nod, but didn't say much. Later, she caught him whispering something to Wyatt out by the barn. She couldn't hear the words, but she knew what Lynch sounded like. She heard plenty back home. Jack didn't bother hiding his curiosity. "She yours?" he asked Wyatt one day when he thought she wasn't listening. Wyatt looked at him with a stare that shut the question down fast. "She's under my roof. That's all you need to know." Still, Lena noticed the shift in the air, the tension. She wasn't stupid. She knew how it looked, a girl with no family, no ring, and a baby in her belly. People drew their own conclusions. Some were quick to assume. Some were slower but just as dangerous. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling. The wind creaked the old house. The fire had gone out. She could still smell the stew Anita made, still feel the warmth of Wyatt's coat around her shoulders. But her mind kept circling, tight and anxious. What if he changed? What if Jack said something that turned him against her? She turned on her side, curled around the baby like a shield. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. Not yet. She'd learned to wait. The next morning, she helped Anita with the dishes. The older woman didn't talk much unless she had something to say. But after a few minutes of silence, she spoke without looking up. "You run from something, girl." Lena stiffened. "Don't have to say," Anita added, wiping a plate. "Just means you're still running. I can see it in the way you watch doors." "I'm not going back," Lena said, voice low. "Good. Then stop looking over your shoulder. It wasn't advice. It was a command. Lena didn't answer, but her hands moved steadier after that. Wyatt started giving her small tasks, feeding the chickens, brushing down the old mare in the back stable. He didn't say she had to, just offered. She found herself looking forward to the rhythm of it, the small routines. For the first time in weeks, her body didn't ache with fear. But peace was fragile, and on the seventh night, it broke. She saw the truck before Wyatt did. A rusted-out Ford creeping down the ranch road, headlights off, tires kicking up dust. She froze in the doorway, blood draining from her face. She knew that truck. Even before it got close, she knew. Her stepfather, the man with a belt in one hand and her name in the other like a curse. He had come for her. Wyatt stepped out onto the porch, face unreadable. You know him. Lena couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Wyatt didn't wait. He walked toward the truck, slow and steady. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. Not yet. The truck idled at the edge of the property, its headlights finally flicking on, blinding against the dark. Lena didn't move from the porch. Her whole body had locked up. She couldn't tell if she was shaking or if the ground was. The sight of that truck, the dull scrape on the left fender, the busted mirror he never fixed, dragged her back to a place she'd worked so hard to leave. Her lungs felt tight. Too tight. Wyatt didn't say a word. He didn't ask questions or demand answers. He just stepped down from the porch, slow and steady like always, one hand resting by his side. Not threatening, just ready. The truck didn't pull in all the way. It stopped short of the house. A door opened. A figure stepped out. The shape of him made Lena flinch. He hadn't changed. Still broad-shouldered, still moving like he owned the ground under him. Her stepfather's voice carried across the yard, sharp as gravel. I know she's here. Wyatt didn't respond right away. The dogs, silent until now, started growling low in their throats, the hair on their backs rising. Lena stayed frozen in the doorway, one hand clenched around the frame. The man took another step forward. She's my daughter. No, Wyatt said, voice even. She's not. The man's jaw flexed. You got no right to keep her. Wyatt didn't budge. She's here by her own choice. She's a minor. She's pregnant. Scared. Bruised. And she's got a name, not a collar. Lena had never heard someone speak for her like that before. Never heard someone stand between her and the man who'd ruined everything. It took all the strength she had not to fall to her knees on the spot. She didn't know what would happen next, if fists would fly or if the man would charge forward. But after a few thick moments of silence, her stepfather turned, muttered something under his breath, and got back in the truck. The headlights cut across the porch once more. Then the vehicle reversed, tires spitting gravel before disappearing down the road. Wyatt didn't turn around right away, just stood still, watching until the dust had settled and the silence wrapped around them again. Then, slowly, he climbed the porch steps and looked at her. You all right? Lena nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. He didn't press, just gave a small nod and opened the door wider. Come on inside. That night, neither of them slept much. She sat by the fire, blanket around her shoulders, trying to shake the feeling of being watched. Wyatt brewed tea in silence, the kind that smelled like mint and sage. He handed her a mug, then sat down across the room, not too close. You don't have to talk about it, he said, but if you do, I'll listen. Lena looked down at the tea. Steam curled up and tickled her nose. She didn't speak. Not yet, but the words were starting to form quietly in the back of her mind. That moment, as quiet as it was, became a turning point. Nothing loud or dramatic, just a thread of trust tying itself between them, invisible but strong. In the mornings that followed, Lena fell into the rhythm of ranch life. She fed the chickens before sunrise, helped Anita with canning vegetables in the kitchen. She rubbed salve on the old mare's legs. The work was hard, but it gave her something she hadn't had in months: purpose and routine. It kept her hands busy and her thoughts from spiraling. One afternoon, Wyatt showed her how to saddle a horse properly. She laughed when the stirrup strap slapped her wrist, And he smiled faintly, not a grin, not loud, but the kind of smile that made her feel like she'd done something right. "You ever ride before?" he asked, holding the reins out. She shook her head. "Only in my dreams." "Well," he said, gesturing to the saddle, "best start small." She hesitated, then took the reins, her fingers brushing his for the briefest second. Her hands were still raw from work, her nails chipped, but in that moment, she didn't feel broken, just present, and strong in a way she hadn't been before. She rode a short circle around the barn, heart pounding, legs shaking by the end. When she climbed down, Wyatt didn't say much, just nodded again, a quiet pride in his eyes. Later, by the fence, she caught him looking toward the horizon with that faraway look he sometimes wore, like he was watching ghosts. "You said someone helped you once," she said. "What happened?" He didn't answer right away, just leaned against the fence post, eyes on the land. "I was 18, he said finally. "Left home after my old man laid me out with a shotgun. Not the barrel, just the butt. Still split my head open. I wandered into a camp run by an old cowboy named Saul. Man didn't say more than 10 words a day, but he fed me. Gave me a bed in the barn. Taught me how to work. Never asked me why I left. Never treated me like a problem." He glanced at her then. "Sometimes that's all a person needs." Lena nodded slowly. That night, she sat out on the porch for a long time. The stars above the ranch were brighter than anything she'd seen in town. The sky looked bigger here, like maybe there was room for her too. In the weeks that followed, the baby grew heavier. Her back ached more. Some nights, she couldn't sleep. But she started talking more, telling Wyatt little things. Her favorite food, the way her brother used to sneak her candy when their mother wasn't looking. The song she used to hum to calm herself down. He listened. Always. He told her more too. About the time a foal was born breech, and he had to save it with nothing but twine and prayer. About the dog that showed up one winter and refused to leave. About his mother, who died too young, and the worn photograph he kept of her tucked in an old Bible. There were still bad days. Sometimes she cried without knowing why. Sometimes she flinched at loud noises, and Wyatt would gently leave the room, giving her space without abandoning her. Anita started leaving little jars of tea blends in her room, labeled for sleep or for nerves. Even Jack, who still gave her sideways glances, started nodding at her in the mornings. Once, she found a bundle of baby clothes on her bed, soft and clean, clearly old but carefully folded. No note, just the scent of cedarwood and soap. She suspected Anita, but said nothing. Gratitude stuck in her throat too often. One morning, Lena helped Wyatt repair a broken fence post. The sun was just rising, spilling gold over the hills. She handed him nails, held the boards steady. Afterward, they sat on the back porch drinking water, sweat on their brows. "I've been thinking," he said after a while. "There's a midwife lives past the creek. Name's Miriam. She's good, quiet, doesn't ask for papers or names." Lena tensed. "You think I need her now?" "Soon. You're getting close." She put a hand to her belly. It was true. The kicks were stronger. The weight was harder to carry. She nodded, staring out at the fields. "I'll take you when you're ready," he added. "You say the word." That night, Lena sat in bed with a notebook Anita had given her, a stub of a pencil in her hand. She started writing names. Baby names. She didn't know why. Maybe it made everything feel real. Maybe it made her feel like she was doing something right. In the quiet, she wrote the name Jamie and underlined it once. Then again, she didn't notice Wyatt standing in the doorway until he cleared his throat. "Got something for you," he said, holding out a wooden box. She blinked, startled. "What is it?" He stepped in and set it on the bed. Inside were tiny baby socks, a rattle car from wood, a silver pin shaped like a horse, and at the bottom, a small blue blanket with stitched edges. "It was my sister's," he said. "She passed a long time ago. I kept it. Thought maybe one day someone might need it more than I did." Lena didn't know what to say. Her throat tightened, eyes stinging. She reached out and touched the blanket like it was something holy. "Thank you," she whispered. Don't thank me, he said gently. Just promise me one thing. She looked up. Don't go back, he said. Not to what hurt you. Not even in your mind. She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. I won't. The days grew warmer. The ranch moved into summer with slow ease. The horses nickered in the morning mist. The chickens pecked at the ground, loud and nosy. And Lena smiled more. She still had nightmares. Still jumped at slamming doors. But there was something new now, something stronger than fear. Hope. She felt it in the way Wyatt brewed her tea just right. In the way Anita scolded her gently for doing too much. In the way the baby kicked when she sang to it at night. She was still bruised, still healing. But for the first time, she believed she might survive. And not just survive, she might actually live. The wind howled outside, carrying dust and the scent of oncoming rain. Lena sat near the fire, one hand on her belly, the other clutching the letter she'd gotten in town earlier that day. The paper shook between her fingers. The words weren't many, just a few sentences scrawled in a hand she knew too well. Her stepfather had found out where she was. The envelope hadn't been stamped, just slid under the supply truck's windshield. It meant he'd come all the way out here, watched, waited, and let her know he could still get close. She hadn't told Wyatt yet. Not because she didn't trust him, but because she didn't want to see that calm, solid look in his eyes change. He'd built her a little world out here, one where she could breathe and begin again. But now she could feel it cracking like glass under pressure. The baby kicked, harder than usual. She winced and adjusted in her chair, letting out a shaky breath. The pain was sharper today. Not labor, not yet, but enough to remind her just how close it was getting. That night, she didn't sleep. The shadows in the corners of the room stretched long, and every creak in the house made her flinch. When dawn finally came, she went outside barefoot, stood in the dew-wet grass, and let the cold sting her skin. She didn't cry. The tears stayed locked behind her eyes, hard and unmoving. At breakfast, Wyatt noticed. He always did. His hand paused halfway to the coffee pot. You all right? She forced a nod, eyes fixed on her plate. Just tired. You sure? She hesitated, then reached into her pocket, unfolded the letter, and slid it across the table. Wyatt read it slowly, jaw tightening. His eyes didn't change, but the quiet in the room did. It turned heavier, tighter. Could have come last night, he said. Could have been watching the whole time. Lena's stomach twisted. I know. He folded the paper once more, tucked it into his coat. We'll handle it. What does that mean? It means you're not alone. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But that old fear had a way of curling around her ribs, digging in like barbed wire. What if he came while Wyatt was in town? What if he broke a window, slipped in, and she couldn't run fast enough? She spent the day on edge, barely able to focus. The horses picked up on her unease, shifting restlessly. Even Anita noticed, her quiet glances longer than usual, her questions more careful. That afternoon, Wyatt reinforced the locks on the windows and showed her where the old shotgun was kept. You know how to use it? He asked. She stared at the gun. Her hands itched. I think so. Good. But I'll be damned if it ever comes to that. She wished that promise meant more. But fear didn't listen to promises. It listened to footsteps outside a window at night. It listened to the voice that still haunted her dreams. Days passed. The letter changed everything. She couldn't settle, couldn't relax. Even a baby seemed unsettled, moving too much, too strong. Her body felt like a stranger to her, aching in new places, sleep escaping her. She started avoiding Wyatt's eyes, afraid he'd see the spiral she was caught in. One night, after dinner, Anita found her in the barn, sitting on a hay bale, face buried in her hands. The older woman didn't say anything right away, just sat beside her and offered her a piece of peppermint candy. Lena took it with shaking fingers. I know that look, Anita said softly. What look? Like the world's closing in and you can't breathe. Lena nodded, unable to speak. I had a daughter once, Anita continued. Sweet girl, Ran off with a man who made promises he didn't keep. We didn't talk for years. Then one night, she showed up at the door with a baby and bruises and eyes too old for her age. Lena looked up, heart pounding. She never told me what happened. Didn't need to. I knew, and I didn't ask. Just wrapped her in a blanket and sat beside her. Like now, the tears came then. Lena couldn't stop them. She cried for too long, shoulders shaking, breath hitching. Anita didn't speak again, just waited. After that night, something shifted between them. Anita, always gentle, became a steadier presence. She started walking with Lena to check the garden, slipping warm bread into her hands when she hadn't eaten enough. Sometimes she brushed Lena's hair while they sat on the porch, humming low songs that reminded Lena of a time before everything went wrong. But inside, Lena was unraveling. Each night, her dreams got darker. She saw her stepfather's face in the window, felt his hand on her wrist, heard the slam of the door. Even when she woke, the fear clung to her like sweat. One morning, she snapped at Wyatt, over nothing really, just a question about fence posts. Her voice was sharper than she meant it to be, and he froze, eyes narrowing just a little before he stepped back. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He didn't get mad, just nodded. "I know it's not me." She hated that he had to say it, hated that she could feel herself becoming someone else, jumpy, raw, unreachable. The next few days, she kept her distance, afraid of hurting him more. She wandered the fields alone, her belly growing heavier with each step. Her back screamed by sunset, but she couldn't stop moving. Stillness meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering. It all came to a head one evening when the wind kicked up hard and a door slammed shut behind her. The sound ripped her back to that night. The cold tile floor, the screaming, the belt. She dropped to the ground instantly, covering her head, sobbing into the dirt. Wyatt found her there, frozen in place, her whole body trembling. He didn't touch her, just sat down a few feet away and waited until her breathing slowed, until her hands unclenched. "I'm not all right," she whispered finally. "I know," he said gently, "but you don't have to be. Not yet." She let herself lean toward him then. Not fully, not all at once, but enough that their shoulders touched. Enough that she could feel the warmth of someone who didn't want anything from her but truth. That night, they sat together for hours, saying little, just existing in the same space, breathing the same air. She didn't have to be strong for him, didn't have to pretend. Later, as she lay in bed, the baby shifted, then stilled. She held her belly and whispered, "They're going to be okay. I don't know how yet, but we are." The next morning brought more pain than usual. She gritted her teeth and tried to work through it, but her body was telling her something she didn't want to admit. The baby was coming. Too soon. She stood in the yard, hands on her knees, breath coming short and fast. Anita saw it before she could call out, came running, voice sharp, calling for Wyatt. He came fast, dirt on his hands, sweat on his brow. He looked at her once and didn't waste time. "Miriam," he said, "we've got to go now." But the truck wouldn't start. Something was wrong with the engine, just when they needed it most. Wyatt cursed and ran to saddle the horses. "You'll ride with me," he said, lifting her gently. "Just hold on." The ride to Miriam's cabin was a blur of pain and jostling and breath that wouldn't come right. Her hands clenched his shirt, her eyes blurred with tears. When they finally reached the cabin, the midwife opened the door before Wyatt could knock. She took one look at Lena and nodded. Inside. Now, Wyatt stayed with her until Miriam gently pushed him out. "This is her space now," she said. "She needs to be the strong one." He lingered at the door for a long second, then left. Inside, the pain came in waves, stronger than Lena had expected. She was scared, scared of the hurt, scared of what might go wrong, scared she wasn't enough. "You're not alone," Miriam whispered, wiping sweat from her brow. "You've got life inside you. That makes you strong." Lena screamed through clenched teeth. The fear twisted through her, but something stronger rose up beneath it. Not rage, Not hate. Will. And with that, she pushed. Hours later, when the cries finally filled the room, Lena sobbed with relief. Miriam laid the baby on her chest, small, perfect breathing. "It's a girl," she said. Lena didn't speak, just held her tight, like she'd never let go. The sun was just rising when Wyatt stepped into the room again, dirt still on his boots, eyes wide. "She's here," Lena whispered. He didn't cry, didn't say much, just took one look at the baby, then at her and nodded. "You did good, Aga," he said. Lena leaned back against the pillows, exhausted, broken open, but whole for the first time. Her body ached. Her heart still bore scars, but in her arms was proof that something good had come out of the darkness. And for the first time in her life, she believed she might be more than what was done to her. She was a mother now, and that meant she had something worth fighting for. The night settled over the ranch like a heavy blanket, the kind that smothers sound and hope alike. Lena sat on the creaky porch steps, the baby cradled against her chest, tiny fingers curled around her own. The warmth of the child, the slow, steady heartbeat beneath her palm, was the only thing keeping the dark at bay. But inside, a storm was brewing, one she had no choice but to face. Wyatt came out of the house with a lantern, its weak glow casting long shadows across the yard. He sat down beside her without a word. The silence between them was thick, like the air before a thunderstorm. After a few moments, he spoke, his voice low and steady. "You can't hide from it forever." She swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the swaying branches. "I don't want to." The letter from weeks ago had been only the first reminder that her past wasn't done with her. Every creak of a door, every whispered footstep outside the barn, every stray glance in town made her skin crawl. But it wasn't just fear that clung to her. It was shame, anger, and a sadness so deep it felt like it had roots in her bones. The man who haunted her, her stepfather, had a way of making her feel small, worthless. His fists had left bruises, yes, but worse were the words he'd thrown like knives, slicing into her soul until she believed she was nothing more than a mistake. But now, holding this fragile life, she knew she couldn't run anymore. Not just from him, from herself. Wyatt's hand found hers, rough and sure. "I'm with you," he said. "Whatever happens." It was a promise, but also a challenge. A call to fight. The next day, she barely slept, nerves tightening her chest like a noose. The sun had barely risen when she heard the sound, a slow, deliberate knock on the front door. Her heart leapt in her throat. She froze, the baby in her arms stirring softly. Wyatt appeared behind her, calm but tense. "I'll handle it." She wanted to stop him, to beg him not to open that door. But her voice was lost somewhere deep inside. When the door creaked open, a shadow filled the threshold. The man's face was older, harder than she remembered, but the eyes were the same, cold and filled with cruel certainty. "You don't belong here," he said, voice low and threatening. Lena stood, steady despite the trembling in her knees. "I'm not the girl you knew, and this is my home now." Wyatt stepped forward, blocking the man's path. "You're done. Stay away." The man sneered. "You think you can protect her? She's mine." Anger flared in Wyatt's eyes, but he held back, the tension between them electric. Lena could feel her own blood pounding. She wanted to scream, to run, to tear him apart with words. Instead, she spoke with quiet power. "You don't own me. You never did. And I have a life you'll never touch." The man laughed, bitter and empty. "You're weak. Always have been." Lena's fist clenched. The years of silence, of fear, of pain boiled up inside her. But instead of breaking down, something inside cracked open and poured out. "You're wrong," she said, voice rising with every word. "I'm not weak. I'm here. I survived. I'm a mother now, and I'm not afraid." The man's face twisted, rage flaring, but before he could strike, Wyatt moved like a shadow, pushing him back. The man stumbled, then turned and disappeared into the night with a parting curse. Lena sank to the porch steps, breath heaving, tears streaking her face. Wyatt sat beside her, silent but steady. For the first time, she let herself feel everything: the fear, the anger, the relief, and above all, the strength that had been buried deep inside her all along. "You did good," Wyatt said softly. She nodded, looking down at the baby. "We did good." The night didn't feel so heavy anymore. The darkness hadn't vanished, but it no longer ruled her. She'd faced the ghost of her past, and in doing so, had found the courage to build something new, something real, something lasting. The first light of dawn slipped quietly over the horizon, softening the harsh lines of the ranch with a gentle glow. Lena sat on the porch, the baby nestled in her arms, her breath slow and steady as she watched the sky change from deep indigo to pale gold. The world was waking up around her, birds singing, wind stirring the grass. But inside, there was a new kind of calm, a quiet that had nothing to do with forgetting the past and everything to do with moving forward. Wyatt came out carrying a steaming cup of coffee. He settled beside her without a word, their shoulders touching in a comfortable silence. For a long moment, they just sat, watching the morning grow brighter together. It felt like a promise, not one made with words, but with presence. The kind of promise that says, "I'm here. We'll face it all together." She shifted the baby, whose tiny hand curled around her finger, and smiled softly. This little life was fragile and new, but it carried with it something fierce: hope. The hope she'd thought she lost forever. Wyatt's eyes met hers, steady and warm. "You look tired." "I am," she said, her voice low but steady. "But it's a good kind of tired." He reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle but certain. "You've been through hell." Lena's gaze dropped to the child in her arms. "I've been through worse, but I'm here, and she is too." The weight she'd carried for so long, the fear, the shame, the pain, hadn't vanished, but it had shifted, becoming something she could bear, something she could even learn to live with. The days that followed were quieter. There was work to be done, fences to mend, fields to tend, lessons to learn about motherhood. Every small task grounded her, giving her strength in routine and rhythm. Wyatt was there for the hard work and the easy moments. He taught her how to feed the baby, how to calm her when the cries came hard and sudden. He carried water, chopped wood, and built a cradle from old barn scraps. His steady hands shaped their new life with care. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Lena found herself standing at the edge of the pasture, watching the horses graze. The wind tugged at her skirts and whispered through the tall grass. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the weight of the past pressing down. Instead, there was a quiet strength in her chest, like roots growing deep into the earth beneath her feet. Wyatt joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. "You ever think about what comes next?" She leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. "I'm done running." He smiled a slow, sure smile. "Good, because I'm not letting you." Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a wordless understanding that this was more than survival. It was a beginning. That night, the house was still except for the soft breathing of the baby in her arms. Wyatt came to her side, and she looked up at him, heart fluttering in a way it hadn't in a long time. His hand brushed her cheek, warm and steady, a silent question in his eyes. She didn't hesitate. The years of fear and pain seemed to fall away in that moment, replaced by something raw and real, a need for closeness, for healing, for trust. They moved slowly, tenderly, like two broken things trying to fit together again. Every touch, every whispered word was a step towards something whole, a quiet union born from shared hardship and hope. When the night deepened, they lay side by side, breathing in sync, the baby sleeping between them. Lena's fingers traced patterns on Wyatt's arm, her heart steady and sure. She felt safe. She felt home. The past hadn't disappeared, but it no longer defined her. It was a shadow at the edges of a life that was finally hers to shape. Outside, the first stars blinked awake, and Lena closed her eyes, holding the warmth of this new beginning close. Tomorrow was unknown, but for the first time, she was ready.